other good souls are joining us today from home, viewing us on YouTube online. A few announcements before the service begins. The Socks and Undies collection is underway again this year. It will provide new socks and underwear for adults and children in the Pathways for Children and Grace Center programs. There will be a collection box at the Church Street door of our church, as well as outside the Rockport UU Society building and inside Nelson's in Gloucester and the John Tarr store in Rockport. I hope I got that right. Holly Tangway and Kate Ruzecki will be leading the effort, and so they'll have more information if you'd like to know more, or you can contact the church office. Do not forget about next Sunday's concert of Bach instrumental selections. It will be presented by the Gloucester Meeting House Foundation, and it will take place right here at the church, of course, on Sunday, May 22nd at 8 p.m. Saturday. Sorry, so sorry. I think I said Sunday last week also, so my apologies. Saturday at 8 p.m. Okay, thanks, Charles and Gary. And you can get more accurate information from the flyers, which you'll hopefully see in a lot of different places. And feel free to post these anywhere you think people are likely to see them. If anybody would like to bring an arrangement of flowers for a Sunday service, please contact Christine in the church office. The flowers can be given, if you wish, in memory of someone or something, or in celebration of someone or something special. You can find more details about all the above and more, of course, in your emailed church announcements. They arrive in your inbox each Friday. If you're not getting them, please contact the church office because it really is a lot of interesting and pertinent information about church life in those emailed announcements. Usually they come out, as I say, on Friday. So check your inboxes for the church announcements, and we strongly encourage you to just take a few minutes to read them. You will find a lot of interesting and pertinent information about what's happening in your church. Today's service, as usual, is being live streamed on YouTube. We're very happy that people who cannot be here in person can take part in the church service in this way. And if you are watching from home, we encourage you now to take a minute to get a candle or chalice and matches ready so you can join in when we light the chalice here shortly after the service starts in a few minutes. Finally, while Reverend Janet is away on a well-earned 3-month sabbatical, the life of the church continues as usual, thanks to our hardworking staff and our lay leaders. If you should need assistance or pastoral care this summer, please do not hesitate to contact the church office. Also, our pulpit will be filled each Sunday by church members or visiting preachers. Today, we are fortunate to have our own Charles Nazarian leading the service. Charles needs no introduction. And now, let us prepare our minds and our spirits for worship.
Good morning. You were supposed to get a guest minister, and Art McDonald from the Essex Church, but Art McDonald developed COVID, and we got a call on Tuesday saying, oops, so I'm the stand-in for the stand-in. Volume is up a little high on this, but maybe it's better now. There it is. That's much better. Thank you. For many of you, if you've not been here before, please be welcome to our 1806 home. This building was built for the first Universalist congregation in America, whose first service was actually held in 1774 in the Sargent family home nearby. And it was led by Reverend John Murray, whose portrait is over there to the right, and by his wife, Judith Sargent Murray, whose portrait is over there to my left. And they were known for their incredibly progressive views on equality, freedom of religion, and social justice. John Murray's message that all people should be, in the end, reconnected with the Creator Spirit, resonated in Gloucester, and the reason why this building is so large, it was built with 600 seats initially, is because that message of hope and of love caught on in Gloucester. And we are the inheritors of this wonderful, wonderful building today. There are a few features here, many of them from 1806 that are of note. The chandelier, which a few of you are seated under, was originally lit by whale oil, and it still drops to the floor for us to put LED bulbs in it. The clock, which is on the gallery, is a Willard clock, and it was here in October 1806 when the building was opened, and it is still chiming today as it did then. So we bid you a warm welcome. If you have not been here before and you'd like to know more about the church, please fill out a card on the pew, and we will get that information to the office and have somebody give you a call. We are a warmly welcoming congregation, and so people of all sexual identities and gender identities are welcome here. And also, we welcome people of all different faiths and also of their own journeys, whether they harbor a traditional faith or whether they simply find wonder in the natural world around us and want to engage with that mystery of that. Everyone is welcome here. We also sometimes overplay the fact that we are the first Universalist church in America, but we do have a sense of humor about it. Diane Peck, who's a member of the choir, once dubbed this place Our Lady of Universalism. So you can tuck that into your back pocket and take it home with you. Lucille and I are now going to read for you an excerpt from the Beatitudes. These were given to us through Jesus' teachings in the Sermon on the Mount. I will read one part and Lucille will respond. Blessed are you poor, the realm of God is yours.
Blessed are you who hunger today, you shall be satisfied.
Blessed are you who weep today, you shall laugh.
Blessed are the humble, they will inherit the earth.
Blessed are the merciful, they will find mercy.
Blessed are the peacemakers, they will be ranked as children of God.
You are the salt of the earth, and if salt becomes tasteless, how is its saltiness to be restored? It is good for nothing.
You are the light of the world. When a lamp is lit, it is not put under a bushel, but on the lampstand, where it gives light to everyone in the house.
We'll now sing our opening hymn. Steve will play it through once, and stand if you are able and join the choir in singing number 159 in the Gray Hymnal, This Is My Song. In the Unitarian Universalist faith tradition, we enter into worship by the simple act of kindling our chalice. Our chalice will be lit by Lucille this morning. As we wait for the chalice to be lit, we invite people to recite the affirmation below, and we invite newcomers and guests to read along. If at home you have a candle, please light it as we recite the affirmation together. In the light of truth and the warmth of love, we gather to seek, to sustain, and to share. Life is a gift for which we are grateful. We gather in community to celebrate the glories and the mysteries of this great gift. And because of the war in Ukraine, we have begun lighting a peace candle, and we hope that in time peace will come, but until that time comes, we will light a candle every Sunday. And this morning, we also remember the massacre of 10 people in Buffalo, another senseless act of violence, unfortunately done in the name of white supremacy, when we keep the people of Buffalo in our hearts.
Is number 503 in your gray hymnal. So I'll wait it. 593. Thanks, Charles. Please read the italicized lines. Liberation is costly. Even after the Lord had delivered the Israelites from Egypt, they had to travel through the desert. They had their responsibilities and difficulties of freedom. There was starvation and thirst, and they kept complaining. Many of them preferred the days of bondage in the flesh pots of Egypt. We must remember that liberation is costly. It needs. We must hold hands and refuse to be divided. We must be ready. Some of us must be prepared our liberation discipline. But those people will have contributed to the struggle.
During the period of the beginning of the COVID pandemic, I returned to a practice which I had let go of for many years, and that is to recite a few prayers before I fell asleep. And one of them I'd like to share with you as the Pastoral Prayer. It changes from night to night, but it goes like this, and you can adapt it in any way that you like. Great Spirit, center of the universe, source of all power, light, and love. Beyond my understanding, beyond all human understanding, like infinity itself, you feel so far away. But also so close as the spark of life in every living thing. And that spark of life, we know, binds us together. Great Spirit, we often find it hard to believe that you are there. And when difficulties come, we wonder why they are allowed to be. But we ask for strength to deal with those difficulties, because we know in this life it is our hands, our spirit, our determination that can make a difference. And we ask for the strength, for the determination, for the wisdom to go ahead day by day. We recognize in the universe the power of love as the central power of everything good. And we ask for that blessing of goodness and love to be upon our suffering world. We'll take a few minutes for silent meditation. Thank you, Steve, for that beautiful music. Perfect end to a meditation. Our reading today is from St. Gregory of Nyssa. He was a mystic who lived in Cappadocia in Asia Minor around 380 AD. And he described the Beatitudes, which Lucille and I read antiphonally at the beginning of the service, as a way to bring peace into the midst of our trials and tribulations on this earth. He described them this way: Beatitude is a possession of all things held to be good, from which nothing is absent that a good desire may want. Perhaps the meaning of beatitude may become clearer to us if it is compared with its opposite. Now, the opposite of beatitude is misery. Misery means being afflicted unwillingly with painful sufferings.
To support the work of this church and all its ministries, this morning's offering will now be received. Blessings upon the givers and upon the gifts.
Art MacDonald had written a sermon for this morning, and it was a very thoughtful sermon about peace, but it was also very individual to him. He had served in the military in his youth, and he and I had a conversation about whether or not I should present it, and after I reread it and we had a chat, we agreed he should present it sometime. So this morning I'm going to share with you a few thoughts and a reflection about what is peace. And maybe Art will come and give us his message another time. In our call to worship, Lucille and I recited the Beatitudes from Jesus' Sermon on the Mount. They are among the most profound messages to humanity from the great teacher. Each one expresses in a different way the importance of humility, charity, and love for other people. They also imply the transformation of our inner selves away from our instinctive selfish impulses and a sense of entitlement. They are positive statements about the virtues in life that ultimately can become their own reward. We are blessed, not necessarily by a deity, but by our own actions that promote comfort in times of trouble, sharing where there's scarcity, seeking truth when there is confusion and falsehood, and practicing forgiveness when it may be hard to forgive, and especially in making peace when territorial or acquisitive impulses that we are born with threaten the lives or whole peoples in war. Blessed indeed are the peacemakers. In this time, our culture has been forced to recognize once again that the murder, destruction, and cruelty of senseless war has not gone away, despite all of our technology, our scientific knowledge, and prosperity. Since the story of Cain and Abel in the book of Genesis in the Hebrew Bible, the roots of our cultural story demonstrate that because of jealousy, feelings of inferiority, lust for land, power, or money, we humans are capable of killing not only one another, but even our own brothers and sisters. Such is the tragedy of the war between Russia and Ukraine. When we lit the peace candle, we wonder for how long it will take to end this utter madness. When will peace come? Sometimes it seems like these things should be of the long past and not of our time. They seem entirely unreal and unimaginable, much as people after the First World War, who called it the Great War, thought it could never happen again. Haven't we evolved into better people over time on this planet? But we just remembered the Holocaust a few weeks ago in our program with Temple Avad Hakim, and we know all too well that the worst magnitude of human murder and genocide occurred only 75 years ago, a speck in time compared to human history. How can we, or the Jewish people, ever forgive or even find peace? And American politics over the past several years has been, frankly, a mess. With polarization, politicians who practice lying as a social media skill, sometimes we wonder, how did such selfishness, egotism, and twisting of values come about? Words are often rearranged to have exactly the opposite meaning that we used to recognize. When did life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness become keep out the refugee, freedom for everyone to carry a gun, and an attitude of my country was made only for people who look like me and believe what I believe? Where do we look to find peace in such an environment? Speaking of human nature, can you remember all the way back to your early childhood when you, or perhaps your children, nieces and nephews, were taught to share your toys? Child psychologists explain how toddlers eventually come to recognize what is part of their body and what is not. Then gradually, that extends to learning what things belong to them, like a favorite blanket or toy. Just around the time that we learn to talk, possession becomes very important, and we can all probably recall that sense of something, of being my doll or my truck. Then the adults start telling us that we have to share them, to be nice, to let a sibling or a playmate enjoy something that we felt entitled to be ours alone. In watching that human development process, we also observe that even as adults, highly socialized and educated as we may be, that those instincts never actually go away. In the Beatitudes, Jesus exhorts us to think of others, not just ourselves or our possessions, and to have empathy. But in the current global context, we see that Vladimir Putin, claiming that Ukraine was always part of Russia, and therefore, in his view, as close to an absolute monarch as he could be, it belongs by extension to him. It does not matter how much suffering it causes. And this is not so different from a child who bullies another child in order to keep a hold of something that was viewed as a possession. And we all know that there isn't going to be peace in that household for quite a while. So what does it mean to be blessed if it is so often counter to our own instincts? The word beatitude is certainly not in familiar usage, but when we go back to St. Gregory of Nyssa, We learn that he was known for teaching the principle that spiritual life is not one of static perfection, but of constant progress. And to me, that view is remarkably similar to the Unitarian Universalist principle of seeking truth and meaning. He says, Beatitude is a possession of all things held to be good, from which nothing is absent that a good desire may want. So in one example, blessed are the merciful, for they shall obtain mercy, what he is saying is that if we do the opposite and we don't have mercy, compassion, and practice forgiveness, we ourselves will be miserable. That misery comes from a kind of blindness, of being, as he said, being afflicted unwillingly, perhaps because we expect no kindness from others, and go about our lives defending what we possess or think we should have. That certainly does not sound peaceful. In another, blessed are they who mourn, it implies that we have deep feelings about loss, perhaps about a loved one or a tragedy, or perhaps in recognizing our own failings. But by mourning and being vulnerable, we also become open to our emotions, and gradually that can lead to a place of comfort, perhaps of a kind of acceptance about our shared human condition with others who also mourn. And through that, we may be comforted. Then there is the remarkable one about peace. Blessed are the peacemakers, for they shall be called the children of God. What does that mean to us today? Perhaps we are reminded of the phrase, we are all God's children. I think it is very close to the Unitarian Universalist teaching about the interconnected web of existence. As we contemplate this world, our cultures, our fragile planet's environment, we recognize that we are all in this together. Our actions have consequences, and if we are able to bring about peace between people, even in a small way, it resonates like ripples on a pond. In many ways, large and small, we can be diplomats, making peace among the people around us. We may fail at times, that's for sure. But being a peacemaker doesn't guarantee success. It means trying to create peace. Well, it all sounds good in the abstract, doesn't it? But I'm reminded all the time that it is very hard to put into practice. I have a neighbor. Oops, maybe I shouldn't talk about that. Okay, how many of you have a neighbor with whom you've had trouble? Raise your hands. All right. What is it about proximity that always seems to lead to the endless replay of the Hatfields and the McCoys? Or maybe you remember Tevye and the Fiddler on the Roof describing an argument in his old Jewish community. It was a horse. It was a mule. Okay, so my neighbor's trees partly block the view that I cherish. Sunsets over Ipswich Bay. And this absolutely does not make for peaceful relations. Although I do have one neighbor who keeps trying to smooth things over as a peacemaker. But his idea of making peace feels more to me like appeasement. I want to get down to brass tacks with the neighbor and have it out. However I try to see it his way, I still get angry, defensive, and frankly, I end up creating my own misery. How many of you can identify with this? So a few weeks ago, Reverend Janet repeated that wonderful mantra that peace on earth eventually boils down to peace in the home and peace in our hearts. And I'm sorry to report that sometimes it's just not happening. Of course, compared to the horrors of war and genocide, this is a tempest in a teapot in the neighborhood. But the principle is the same. What do I do when it irks me towards anger? Well, I try to take some time out, a time of quiet, and practice gratitude for the many wonderful things that I have and for my home. And sometimes it actually really works. So what is peace anyway? Webster's dictionary has a couple of clues. One of them is it's a freedom from civil disturbance. Example would be peace and order were restored in the town. Or a state of security or order in the community, like a breach of the peace. Or freedom from disquieting or oppressive thoughts or emotions, such as, I have been in perfect peace and contentment. Or it can mean harmony in personal relationships, like those two sisters are at peace with each other. And similarly, it can be a concord between governments or an agreement to end hostilities. And lastly, it can be used to interject and say peace to one another as a greeting or as a farewell. In this context, I have to tell you a story. A few years ago, I was having my roof redone. And I have a stucco chimney which had to be restuccoed and painted. The Hispanic stucco artisan was a very mellow and happy man in his work. And he greeted some workers down below from the chimney. At the ground level, they asked in Spanish how he was. And to my surprise, he responded, tranquilo. There he was, a very busy guy with wet plaster on a scaffolding 45 feet above the ground, and he was at peace. And this also relates to something Reverend Janet shared with us a few weeks ago when we sang, I've got peace like a river. Being at peace does not imply stillness. The surface of a river may appear to be smooth, but there is a lot of activity going on underneath. I think that may be one of the secrets about peace. It is more like harmony in music. Even if the composition we are playing or the life that we're living out is complex or difficult or has many moving parts. That kind of peace, which one can at least hope is able to transcend our selfish and proprietary tendencies, comes from doing some kind of constructive good. But where do we get the strength in rough times when we feel threatened or anxious to, in effect, practice peace? Well, for me and perhaps for you, it can come from consciously setting aside some time for prayer or meditation, even just before bedtime, as I shared with you in the Pastoral Prayer. There is power in that time of letting go of the self and being open to hearing what many call the still small voice within. Or perhaps of simply being aware in the moment of our breathing, of being present, and of letting go all of our clanging daily worries, of allowing tranquility to fill us. Like drinking cool water from a spring, it can refresh our inner selves and help to broaden our perspective from me to everyone, from what's mine to what we all may share. When life seemed to be wearing me down in the past several years, and especially during the anxiety days of COVID, I discovered an app, this being the modern age, called 10% Happiness that I downloaded on my phone. And I found that there were amazingly personal pre-recorded guided meditations there. There were singles on things like concentration, deep relaxation, gratitude, etc., and whole courses if you wanted to dive in. But what I especially appreciated on the site were things like meditation for people who don't want to meditate, that showed that they had a real sense of humor and humility about the human condition. And frankly, one of the leaders, with the melodic name Sebene Selassie, really spoke to me individually. She had been through some very tough things in life, but just listening to her voice and her easy-to-understand messages opened my tranquil paths and let my mind and body relax for a while as it needed. Now, in some Christian traditions, there is a phrase, the peace that passeth all understanding, which is often shared during a service or used at the end of a prayer, and which I feel is very, very close to invoking the Great Spirit, the unknown, the unnameable, the too infinite for us to even imagine. The thing that provides the spark of life that binds every living being together. If we engage with that mystery, even if our scientific and empirical minds cannot or will not embrace the idea of a God, my experience is that we can come closer to living out the Beatitudes. And while it maybe not changing the world, it can change something inside that leads to inner peace. So I've come to believe these things. We can become more humble, less focused on control, and more on seeing our small place in the scheme of things. We can become more merciful, looking out for the needs of others, especially those labeled by segments of our society as unworthy or by virtue of ethnicity or race, lack of wealth, of drug addiction, homelessness, appearance, you name it. I think we can learn to mourn, recognizing our own sorrows as part of a larger connection to others who are mourning, and to appreciate, despite our hurt and our loss, with gratitude, the many good things we have received and enjoyed, and in fact, lost at some point. And we can be peacemakers, perhaps by providing a perspective for the greater good when people, organizations, or even countries have come to that place where no one feels that they can or should back down. It does not mean that we must appease people with truly evil or destructive power, but it may mean finding ways to save people under terrible circumstances, like those who hid Jews in the World War II Holocaust. Few of us are in a position to affect the action of world powers, but we do have the power to seek out solutions that lead to peace in our own homes and in our communities. And I believe that those good acts ripple out and can lead to a greater peace. As St. Gregory of Nyssa pointed out, we so often make ourselves miserable by being self-focused and blind to the people around us. And he shares the magic that in helping others, in commiserating with their sorrows, in understanding their failures as very like our own, and always striving to see our lives as part of the interconnected web of existence, that through that path, we can overcome instinct and indeed be blessed. A life full of meaning and service can become tranquil, despite all kinds of upheavals that inevitably come our way. And that is the best definition of peace that I know. I invite you now to join me in our Unison prayer, which is number 514 in the Gray Hymnal. God, lover of us all, most Holy One, help us to respond to you, to create what you want for us here on earth. Give us today enough for our needs. Forgive our weak and deliberate offenses, just as we must forgive others when they hurt us. Help us to resist evil and to do what is good, for we are yours. Endure with your power to make our world whole. And now we will sing our closing hymn, number 163, For the Earth Forever Turning. Again, Steve will play it through once, give us an introduction, and then we'll jump in. Our closing words are from Project Plowshares. Lead me from death to life, from falsehood to truth. Lead me from despair to hope, from fear to trust. Lead me from hate to love, from war to peace. Let peace fill our hearts, our world, our universe. And now we will extinguish the chalice flame. And if you would like to join with me in the words in your program for extinguishing the chalice, we extinguish this flame, but not the light of truth, the warmth of community, or the fire of commitment. These we carry in our hearts until we are together again. Our service is finished. Our service begins.